Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where, wow, what a ball of string. A ball of string behind a thick, opaque curtain. Yes, as Hollywood is very busy right now, it's becoming more and more difficult to tell exactly how content is performing. Although Hollywood has been famous for creative math for decades. There's always been a joke, well, it's not very funny if you're on the other end of it, but that movies in Hollywood are notorious for never making any money because they explain away all the profit within the studio by the time an outside party is supposed to get their cut. That's why you always want your percentage to be off the top rather, on the gross rather than the profits. Because again, there are no profits. But it's harder to cook the books when even less people are aware of what's in them. And that's what's happening. And that's why you would think everyone would be fine with this. But you'll see that the agencies in particular are upset because they get a cut of their clients' money, but it's becoming harder to get that money. So there's also a big argument brewing from theater owners, and some people in the industry and the media are particularly eager to get business back to business as usual. The studios are like, wait a minute, we like streaming. We get tons of money. You know how much money Netflix has? That's how much money is in streaming. And studios are starting to, really get up and running with their streaming services, particularly Disney. But anyway, back to business as usual means movie theaters fully open again and theatrical windows with transparent box office numbers. Those are transparent because there's a third party involved, the exhibitors. If studios own their own movie theaters, we might not get the box office numbers. So that's very difficult. And so also, these people are very upset with the day and date garbage. They like the box office. It's a clear number. And they want to go back to that. We're going to talk about their arguments during this episode and why they think day and date is garbage. Now, don't worry. There's the other side of the argument, which realizes that it's impossible to go back to business as usual right now. So inventive, albeit shady measures are necessary to keep Hollywood afloat until the end of this pandemic, which I do believe is coming soon, but not as soon as some people think. It's not here now. I think it'll probably be here by the end of the year, early next year. Maybe even next spring, but I think sometime in 2022. I know that sucks, but it's a pandemic. It sucks. Late last week, in fact, Dr. Fauci publicly stated that he personally still would not go to eat indoors, or he specifically said a movie theater, which I'm sure NATO just loved. They're like, come on, Fauci. Especially with movie theater owners currently pressuring their local governments to get their capacity up to 50% right now and to reach 75% capacity by the 4th of July. Some of them are arguing that they have theaters with recliners, which already reduces capacity. It is funny to see how few people are in some theaters, and I know that some of you have been enjoying basically private screenings during the pandemic, but I don't know, I still feel that movie theaters, the best thing they can do is to actually improve the movie-going experience. To make it not dirty, to not have any vermin or bugs in there, to have people behaved, and to not charge exorbitant prices for such poor service. It's like, I think one of the last times I went to the movie theater, I got a soda, a small soda, and M&Ms. This was before I'd given up soda. During the pandemic, I gave up soda. As I said, I only drink water and iced tea. Iced tea's good. It's good. At first it was tough, but I did make the transition. But anyway, it was like $12. And I was like, I only ordered soda and an M&Ms. And they're like, yes, $12. And I was like, what? Usually I don't like to complain about movie theater food prices. I feel it's just part of the experience. But that hit me where it hurt. I was like, what is the price breakdown on that? It was ridiculous. So I'd be curious to how you feel movie theaters could better improve the experience. I think the list is pretty clear, but it's fun to occasionally go over it. It's so clear, they should know about it. Anyway, what's further frustrating is that local governments are allowing businesses to reopen, yet simultaneously advising the public to only go outside for the bare necessities. In New York City, they're opening restaurants, they're opening movie theaters, but yet the New York state government is saying you shouldn't go out at all if you don't have to, because it's, we have a very bad situation right now, as does the whole country. The UK coronavirus variant is surging across the United States, sending younger and younger people to the hospital. Holy mixed messages, Batman. And there are mixed messages at the box office too, as well as on streaming. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And it's a discussion of all things Warner Brothers, as they're the most active studio right now. We've got Godzilla versus Kong. We've got the Snyder Cut. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, although that conversation won't really take place until April 22nd. But even then, Warner Brothers, they did a damn good job just completely shutting that down. It is what it is, and I'm going to talk to you about it today. But also, we're even going to touch at the end of the episode of Mortal Kombat, which hit some theaters overseas this weekend. And there are spoilers everywhere. Thanks, Warner Brothers. It's so ridiculous. Movies should open pretty much day and date globally because of the internet. It's not that hard. Let's start with Godzilla vs. Kong, which is definitely a pandemic blockbuster. It's weird. I'm like, should I call it a hit? I'm not quite sure what to call Godzilla vs. Kong still. I mean, it's the movie that we need right now. That's basically what Godzilla vs. Kong is. And it had some big drops this weekend. We're going to talk about that, but it will likely end its run with about $500 million or close to it. Now, at first you might be like, oh my God, imagine what it would have made if it wasn't a pandemic. Oh, the horror, the injustice. But actually, that's close to what the first Godzilla and Kong Skull Island made. So it's like kind of performing on par with the previous entries in the franchise. And it's even better than the last Godzilla, which, let's face it, came out of the wrong end of Godzilla. It was an atomic fart. I liked the movie, but it did not do well. It was not well received by most people, and it was a real stinker at the box office. Now, as I said last week, I do feel that Godzilla vs. Kong benefited immensely from positioning, with everyone, and I do mean everyone, rallying behind it as the film to jumpstart moviegoing again. I've even seen on some industry message boards in the trades, people saying like, stop criticizing Godzilla vs. Kong. It's a great movie. It's getting people back in theaters, which I think is very funny. But some are going a bit too far in their defense or inflation of the image of Godzilla vs. Kong. For instance, Deadline ran a big story today insisting that Godzilla vs. Kong is likely to forget break even, but turn a profit for Warner Brothers. But they conveniently leave out of their analysis that Warner Brothers only gets 25% of China's box office, the biggest overseas market for the movie by far, and who even knows if those numbers are real at all to begin with. China, as I've told you before, is valuable in that it helps with the box office headlines and rankings and stuff like that. And hey, 25% of something is better than nothing. So I think nobody knows for sure the actual amount of money that Hollywood's getting out of China. Although it can't be totally nothing, or they wouldn't be making this huge effort. So there's money there, but it's not to the degree that it seems on paper. And then also, what about all the secretive deals that Warner Brothers had to make to get Legendary and the attached talent to support the movie going to day and date release on HBO Max? Remember, they had to cut all these crazy deals because everyone was furious with them? So that's going to cut into the movie's profitability for the studio as well. I mean, a lot of people are going to make a lot of money off of Godzilla vs. Kong, probably more than they would have if it had just been released during a normal period. Look at how much money Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot made off of Wonder Woman 1984, and that was a total bomb. But I'm not so sure that includes Warner Brothers, who are turning a profit off of the film, until we see those updated HBO Max subscriber numbers. More on that in a moment. But if Godzilla vs. Kong is, performing on par with some of its previous entries and doing better than pre-pandemic Godzilla King of Monsters, then what are some people complaining about? What's to complain about? Well, first of all, it's just life. There's always people who want to complain. But some are arguing that because the film is also available on HBO Max, repeat viewing has been obliterated, and that's where blockbusters make a lot of their money, which is true. And also, if you got sold out opening weekend, which many did due to capacity restrictions, you hit 50 people in New York, the movie sold out, you just watched it at home rather than waited for the second weekend. I'd like to say, though, on a side note, that I checked the theaters, because, you can check in the app to see how ticket sales are going, and while the premium screens were selling out, like the Dolby and the IMAX screens, it was real easy to get a ticket to a regular screen because those weren't really in demand. I mean, if you wanted to see Godzilla vs. Kong opening weekend and it didn't need to be on a premium screen, it was not hard to do. And I do believe that shows that premium screens are the future of moviegoing. That's what gets you out of the house. So again, it's about the quality of the experience. Why is this so hard for the theaters to understand? They understand it. They just know it's expensive, so they're reluctant to do it. It's also expensive to apparently clean the bathrooms. All right, so anyway, so basically, if you thought blockbusters were front-loaded before, well, that you hadn't seen nothing yet, because they are really, really front-loaded now. I'd also like to say, side note, complainers are complaining that Godzilla vs. Kong, if they're complaining, it's been undercut by the HBO Max availability domestically, because that's the only place HBO Max is right now. But again, it's performing on par with Godzilla King of Monsters domestically in terms of its opening weekend and its second weekend drop. It's getting, the reason it has so much more money than Godzilla King of Monsters is because of the overseas box office. That's what's really helping it. But when it comes to Godzilla King of Monsters, it's going to probably be exactly on par with the domestic performance. Maybe that's just the size of the Godzilla audience here in the United States. So HBO Max might not have affected it at all, quite frankly. I also do believe that a lot of people in this country don't like to go to the movies. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. That's why the ancillary market is so much bigger. So HBO Max might just be opening it up. It's really hard to tell because we don't know very much about movie-going habits pre-pandemic in terms of, because, these numbers are big that come out in the box office, but it actually accounts for a very small fraction of the people who live in the United States who go to the movies each weekend, which is why usually a movie can open around 30 million or so, and that's really actually a good for a normal movie. But then you can jump to these huge, almost 300 million openings for Avengers Endgame because that many more people come out. That just shows you the range that the box office is capable of, that it so rarely hits. It's just the dirty secret of Hollywood. They make it seem like everyone's going to the movies, but the truth is they're really not. But a lot more people stream, which again is why Netflix has just so much goddamn money. Now, when it comes to I told you, this is so complex and all over the place. It's nuts. And that's how Hollywood wants it. They're like, yes, it's too confusing. It's like legal contracts. They're like, go away, you'll never get it. And then we'll keep all the money for ourselves. All right, so when it comes to pandemic second weekend drops, also, how do you explain Nobody, which isn't available on digital until this coming weekend, yet it suffered the same 50% plus drop in its second weekend? And it's not even a giant blockbuster, which, with those usually do have a big second weekend drop. But during a pandemic and with strong word of mouth, which Nobody had, very high audience scores, Nobody should have held better in its second weekend. But Nobody did hold very well, or leveled out in its third weekend. In fact, Nobody, Raya, Tom and Jerry, and The Courier all had drops of less than 20% this weekend. That's fantastic. So that's a trickle. It's like they're holding at really low numbers, but that shows that while the box office definitely has a pulse, it's not exactly pulsating. I think that's why you still need that streaming component, day and date. I personally think the clearest thing about this conversation is that just like people are divided over how to handle everything else during the pandemic, they're also divided as to whether or not they feel safe to go see a movie. And Hollywood wants to get all those people to watch their movie either in theaters or at home. And even the people who do feel safe to go back are still trying to minimize their risk. The truth is that there's nothing to keep the people who went to see the movie opening weekend from seeing it multiple times in theaters instead of HBO Max if they truly wanted to. HBO Max is expensive. It's very expensive. And the theaters are not only relatively empty this second weekend, but there are loyalty programs to bring down the cost. If you're a member of AMC Stubs or the Regal Unlimited, it doesn't cost you anything to see Godzilla vs. Kong, in fact. It's basically you get one free viewing. And Regal, speaking of Regal, some of you pointed out to me that they're offering a free IMAX upgrade for the film, which means it would be very easy to go back and see Godzilla vs. Kong in theaters for that repeat viewing business if that audience existed, if people felt comfortable doing that. So I'm curious. I know a number of you have seen Godzilla vs. Kong multiple times. Did you see it multiple times in theaters? If so, what was your experience each time? And if not, if you just chose to watch it multiple times after the theater at home, why did you decide to do that? I'm curious. I will say that once we reach herd immunity, which is about 75% of the population being vaccinated, theatrical windows should be and must be reinstated. I feel very strongly about that. Although they might be shorter. That's what the pandemic might have done. Warner Brothers and Paramount have already set 45-day windows for 2022. Remember, the norm to digital used to be in the mid-70s. Now it's going to cut down by a whole month. And 2022, again, is when I probably think we will reach herd immunity. I'm curious. What do you think? Now, some have also complained that Godzilla vs. Kong shouldn't have been offered at no extra cost on HBO Max, that Warner Brothers was leaving money on the table by not charging extra like Disney does. Well, we'll see. April 22nd is AT&T's next Investor Day, and they'll be releasing their updated HBO Max subscriber count. Now, last time we saw them, they were somewhere around 17. So if it jumps dramatically, it'll have been worth not charging extra. And don't forget, there's a huge disparity in price between HBO Max per month and Disney Plus. Disney Plus is a much cheaper service. And that's only the only number that we can trust is to see how this grand experiment is working out for Warner Brothers. But as for Warner Brothers' other grand experiment, we'll likely never know exactly how it performed. Let me explain to you why. So HBO Max's new subscriber count will include both the Snyder Cut and Godzilla vs. Kong, with no way to tell who subscribed for what. They're just going to have a big jump, and you're not going to be able to know how much that can be attributed to the Snyder Cut. Now, because fans are so eager to see how the Snyder Cut performed, companies out there, like Real Good, are trying to scratch that itch. Both on Twitter and Variety did a big write-up using Real Good's data. But the problem here is twofold. First problem, Real Good gets its info by polling 2 million users who've signed up to be Real Good viewers. It's a little bit like the Nielsen system. So, this is based on the science of other third-party companies, so it's not anything shady. But you just have to understand the numbers that you're getting. So it's a set 2 million people. But what about all the people who signed up specifically for HBO Max just to watch the Snyder Cut? You're not going to know what kind of a boost that is. So when you look at Real Good's numbers, it's based on, again, that specific group of 2 million. It's on that focus group. So it can't accommodate wild cards like the Snyder Cut, which might have had a further reach. So it's difficult to do. Now, spot polling is used all the time in Hollywood. It's used, to get ratings for movies, like the letter grades and to see who's seeing them. You guys are always like, nobody asked me. Well, I'm sure nobody asked you about this Real Good stuff either, most of you. So it's true. It's spot polling. It's usually somewhat effective, but I feel the Snyder Cut is a little bit outside of the norm. And, spot polling has become very difficult in politics. It's been, shown that it's not able to predict political outcomes the way it used to. And so I think these numbers are skewed. The second problem is that Real Good is not helping the Snyder Cut image whatsoever. In fact, I would say they're hurting it with these charts that they're releasing. Like, look at this one. The top movies of the first quarter for SVOD, which is subscription video on demand instead of premium video on demand where you pay for it a la carte. The Snyder Cut was beat out by The Little Things, Nomadland, that's so bad. And then also Coming to America? Yikes! Although, if this is true, Denzel definitely earned that bonus that he was complaining about. Remember, he was one of the people who was said to be the most upset about the Warner Brothers HBO Max deal for 2021, and he was like, pay me my money! And they did. They paid him a huge bonus. And when I first read about it, I was like, for The Little Things, I think he got like 10 million or maybe even 20. It was like a ridiculous amount of money, especially when you see the movie. But when I see that performance, I'm like, pay the man. He's totally worth it. Bottom line, Warner Brothers will never tell you how the Snyder Cut did. You'll never know. Just like you don't know how other studios' content is doing on their streaming services. You don't know how the Netflix stuff does. You don't know how Amazon does. You don't know how Apple does. You don't know how any of it does. You just don't. Sometimes they release numbers, but then they have weird things like that. If anyone watched a minute of it, that counts as a view. And you're like, how the heck does that count as a view? So I will say that right now, the UK is floating the idea of making Netflix and Amazon legally obligated to disclose ratings so that British companies that receive government funding, which is why the government is so interested in this, can see how their shows are doing on the services because they run, old seasons of British shows. So they would like to know if maybe they should be getting some more money for them. They want to know. So this will be an important first step in transparency in streaming, so let's keep an eye on how that situation develops. Now, speaking of transparency, there was a big headline on Thursday that got a lot of you excited that Sony and Netflix made a deal for Sony to switch from Starz to Netflix for where their movies go on streaming. And some of you assumed that, and I think that the trades and the headlines didn't do anything really to dissuade that assumption, that you would get the Sony movies on Netflix as soon as they were done in theaters. Well, that's not true. So instead, this is what's going to happen. Sony movies will hit Netflix after their usual theatrical runs, but also their PVOD runs, which means after a Sony movie plays in theaters, and that's usually, they might shorten it to a 45-day window, but it's usually about a 75-day window. Then it'll become available for purchase on PVOD. Then it will become available to rent on PVOD. And after all that's played out, then it will become available on Netflix. It's a little bit like, some thought when, remember before Fox was swallowed up by Disney, their movies would end up on HBO? It's like that. That's when these things will come on Netflix. But this is great for Sony and Netflix because Netflix needs to stay competitive with the studios that do have streaming services, and they're going to do the same thing. Disney's not going to continue to put their movies directly on Disney Plus and Warner Brothers on HBO Max. They're going to want to go first to the PVOD window as well. So Netflix now will have big studios' films themselves. So that's important. And then Sony, it said, will get $1 billion from Netflix. So they'll be very happy. Like, I got $1 billion and I didn't have to even build a streaming service. Toodles. Although you're supposed to be a lot more money if you have the subscribers. I mean, again, Netflix can pay Sony $1 billion and still pay like 400 and something million for Knives Out. And that's not even the end of their deal making. They're like, that's just a drop in the bucket for us. So it's crazy. So much money there. All right, and you might be wondering, well, if there's so much money, doesn't the talent that signs with Netflix want to know the numbers so they can get bonuses? Well, right now what Netflix is doing is paying such overhead up front. They're like, just so much money to you that you don't ask about getting additional back end. Although it seems that they're getting, the UK is, and that's because that's not deals with talent, that's deals with companies for second, season, for old seasons or evergreen seasons of their shows, right? Like Peaky Blinders. So that's where they might have gotten into a little bit of trouble over at Netflix. But the way they've been shutting talent up is just by stuffing money down their throats. All right, so let's do our weekly streaming deep dive. Thanks to the explosive Harry and Meghan interview, The Crown rocketed to number 2 this week after that interview aired. That's incredible to me because it doesn't even, I guess it kind of features some of the people who are mentioned in it, but Harry and Meghan aren't even featured on The Crown any of the seasons. But that's incredible to me. So that's great. I think The Crown said they weren't going to do Harry and Meghan, but they'd be nuts not to do them now. Then WandaVision stayed up top despite having wrapped the Friday before. So it gives me hope that Disney Plus will get 2 episodes in the top 10 once we catch up to Falcon and Winter Soldier. Remember, these Nielsen ratings are a couple of weeks late. As for movies, holy crap, Coming to America stayed on top its second weekend. That's amazing. It's even more worth Amazon's money that they paid for that. Well, Yes Day debuted in second place. Wow, that was not a great movie. I gotta tell you, Netflix just needs to provide you with content, and people seem to be quite happy with that. I mean, did you watch Yes Day? What did you think of it? Then Raya continues to look like a Premier Access win for Disney when we see it holding so well in these numbers. Remember, at this point, it's still $30 a pop. And I Care a Lot is still in the top 10. Somebody else give Rosamund Pike a job. She's a Golden Globe winner, god damn it. Now, as for Netflix this week, it looks like Melissa McCarthy and Ben Falcone won't be done making us cringe anytime soon. I can't believe you watched it. You're responsible for whatever happens next, so we have to see more Melissa McCarthy and Ben Falcone movies. It's number 1 on Netflix. I guess everybody's hate watching it. Again, if you watched it, why did you do it? Why did you break down and do it? And on iTunes, speaking of hate watching, I enjoyed Wonder Woman 1984 for what it was, but look, it's doing great at $6 a pop. They found the magic price point for that movie. It's back on top and holding steady. While more, is this a real movie content, is finding an audience as Hollywood continues to hold back its top movies. There's not that much coming out from Hollywood, so all these little movies are finding an audience. As for this coming week, The Nevers starts tonight on HBO Max. And while he was fired, Joss Whedon's name is still all over it. We'll see if anybody tunes in. And with Mortal Kombat pushed back a week in the U.S., more Is This a Real Movie content will hit theaters exclusively. Sebastian Stan, how big of a Sebastian Stan are you? Will you see that crappy movie in theaters? The other one has Barry Pepper in it. Those look like they should have gone direct to PVOD. Mortal Kombat, by the way, opened with 11 million this weekend in 17 markets, and will open in even more markets this coming weekend before finally hitting the United States and other major markets the weekend after, and of course as well HBO Max. Again, be really careful online. There are lots of spoilers. I saw some stuff that I wish I had not seen. On streaming, Netflix drops Dad Stop Embarrassing Me, Jamie Foxx's new sitcom, on Wednesday, the whole thing. And Disney Plus starts with the first few episodes of Big Shot on Friday. Disney Plus will now be, is the Mighty Ducks wrapped? But they're going to be dropping a lot of content on Fridays still. I wonder how those secondary shows are doing. We'll see when we start to see the Nielsen ratings for those weeks. And wow, get ready for some crazy reality TV on streaming this week as Netflix debuts The Circle And then HBO Max debuts something called Wall Street, which is actually pretty brilliantly named. And this is from Mark Wahlberg. It's a reality show about his own movie star life. And it promises, and I quote, powerful business and life lessons. Although, to be fair, Wahlberg does have a mini empire going there. Also, Nobody will hit PVOD finally on Friday, 17 days after its release, starting out at $20 for a 48-hour rental. I really enjoyed that movie. I highly recommend it, even at that price point. When are you going to watch Nobody? Are you going to watch it there? Are you going to wait till you can buy it? Or are you going to wait till you can rent it for cheap like Wonder Woman? So what have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And also, what are your thoughts on Godzilla vs. Kong and the Snyder Cut situations? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.